Okay, so this one's a weird one, isn't it? If you've ever had a fascination with retro video games or were literally there in the old days, then you probably already know that pinball is actually a pretty old game even by the time that this title came out. The old boards were fascinating to watch be taken apart since back in the old days of pinball, they were complex machines meant to spit out entertaining times for their users. They were built back when microprocessors didn't even exist, that companies making them had to create these intricate little mechanical systems in such a compact environment to fit into a normal pinball table. And that was even before you started putting the bells and whistles into the damn thing to make them stand out from their competition. They were pretty ingenious devices back in their day, but eventually, like everything, the boards evolved and included computers to do their computations and providing the more involving and intricate mini-games, bonuses, and the mechanics to their tables to do things that really the older generation couldn't manage with their old teeths and gears. However, as pinball became more and more ubiquitous and demanded as an entertainment option, the concept eventually moved on to video games, and probably a lot earlier than you'd think from the time that we're looking at it now. Pinball was available as an early NES title for the people looking to bring their cabinet experiences to their home televisions, and shortly thereafter, we also got games like Kirby's Pinball Land on the original Game Boy to share the lovely flipper action with players on the go. Kirby's Pinball Land is a curious title, if nothing else, because this is around the third title ever released for the Kirby franchise, where the only work that it could adapt things from was Dreamland, Adventure, and maybe Dreamland 2 if it was lucky. Exactly like the position that the Super Mario Bros. Super Show was in back in the day. Pinball Land was going to have to pull a lot of mileage out of barely anything, or fill in the blanks with a lot on the spot new ideas for this game. Fortunately, a pinball game is not a TV show, so the game was better off as HAL didn't actually need to produce all that much to fill out this game with stuff. The idea is to defeat the 3 villains on their particular boards in order to unlock the door to the final DDD battle, and most of the table assets were carried over wholesale from Dreamland, which I'm perfectly fine with. It's the most logical way to go about this adaptation since both games were just on the same console. You get to play through around the 3 tables on the way to the boss table, having to do some trick shooting in order to make your way through the pinball obstacles to make this game compatible with what a video game is supposed to be, consistent progression. There are definitely limits on the game from this being on the Game Boy. The game is still monochromatic, the tables have to fit the Game Boy screen, which means that most of them are more square than rectangular, and that doesn't give you a lot of space to work with, and the gimmickry of the game isn't as boastful as it could have been due to the memory limitations along with the small number of boards that are actually in the game. Although, the game still isn't boring with these intrinsic flaws exactly like the original Kirby game. The boards do still have their gimmicks, such as shooting small moving targets, hitting multiple places on the board, and hitting targets in specific orders in order to make the gameplay interesting and give you some content, some actual challenge. And the assets that are actually on the boards are thematic and do what they can in order to make some sort of unique level design, in a way to make each board stand out as you kick Kirby all the way to the top. The addition of the challenge in that Kirby can fall through every board in the game and doesn't get an automatic do-over upon entering a new board, and rather making the player earn their golden parachutes, makes some of the longer sections and most of the boss fights pretty intense, since these small mistakes could force you into some required backtracking. It's a give and take between intriguing and annoying as a difficulty idea, but I would say it's one of the better compromises I could think of for this title. The best thing going in this game's favor is that the old cartridge is still able to produce responsive flipper action in the game, which does give you some accurate control of Kirby, although most boards don't have a second set of higher flippers on them due to the mentioned space issue on the Game Boy. They really are pretty formulaic just because they really can't do all that much. The game can't really fit more than 2 flippers on a board that it's using. However, simply from having this well-controlled flipper system in this old game is a great strength that can set it apart from any lesser pinball project. While you aren't going to be getting a full 360-degree range of all the angles, you do get enough movement from the flippers to give this game a compelling skill ceiling to be involved with. On the flip side, no pun intended, the bosses in this game are probably a mixed bag. There's a fundamental problem in a pinball game that pits you against these scripted bosses or ones that do move and attack on their own accords, because the bosses that don't account for the player's position in their AI scripting can have you losing attempts due to accidents, since you don't have full control of where you'll be at all times when you're playing pinball. Unless you know the boss's full behavior by heart, you just can't predict everything it's going to do, and the way that the pinball game works means that you might end up being in the wrong spot at the wrong time, missing your chance to score a hit from a boss fight that you just have no control over. It's probably why boss battles in a pinball game aren't all that common, since it's hard to have these satisfying designs in a game that fundamentally has that Chaos Engine component, because you can win, fail, lose, or succeed in large part just due to how lucky you are, instead of it being on a skills basis. Overall, the boss fights are a touch too long, or they require too many hits to be all that super fun skill challenge at the end of these boards. If you keep hitting bad angles, the boss fight could end up being a slog, and putting those at the ends of the boards is just going to drag the game down super hard, because it's just hard to get there, and that's where the most challenge is. Thankfully, while the game can have these slow moments if you hit a bad shot, they do give you enough chances to keep trying over and over that can make up for the player being stuck in a failure streak if that happens. The game remembers which bosses you killed well enough if you have to start over, and that somewhat limits the required backtracking, which is a nice feature. And even better, the final battle with DDD doesn't actually have its own elongated board attached. You get the 3 keys from the 3 bosses and you can immediately battle him, which is a nice treat from the pinball gauntlets that you were dealing with before. But this also means that HAL is allowed to make DDD a right bastard in that encounter. He throws out more frequent attacks than his contemporaries, he's faster on the board, and the flippers are pushed down a bit more than the other boards, meaning that the player gets less time to react to the final boss while they chew their way to victory. But you're at this point in the game, so really you just keep trying, and one time you'll make it through and get to enjoy a handheld parade of all the characters in this game with that same cutesy Kirby charm that you really wanted when you were checking out this game. That's kind of the entire game in a nutshell. It's a smaller project that tried to pull the original Kirby assets together, reconfigure them, and just made an entirely new game out of the things they were working with for the handheld, and that just didn't come out too much on this platform like the more stable platformers. While the game can be fiddly and frustrating, I did my original run in under 40 minutes, which actually isn't saying all that much because I used save states to avoid the grind, so your mileage may vary on that. You might even get a whole 2 hours out of it, who knows? In essence, it is a very short game, again like Dreamland, and yet the difficulty curve is designed decently enough, and there's enough ideas in the game and enough good design that you can still get somewhat of a complete experience out of it, in spite of there being less than 15-20 boards in the game, of which each one has to be small, compact, not filled with all that much content to fit on the Game Boy screen. The game has enough challenge, it has enough satisfaction with the content that's in it, to be what it's supposed to be, a slightly quirky spin-off of what will become a popular franchise later in its life, and ultimately, I can respect that effort. It's because HAL tried to make something unique out of their platformer mascot, a new idea, and they put some actual heart behind it. I'd say that if you looked at this video at this point, and if you're into this sort of pinball stuff and need to kill some time, I would try and find it on Portable, give this game a spin, and see if you can get into it. Kick it around for a few minutes, and if you like it, well, great, and if you didn't, well, you didn't end up wasting anything on this distraction. I'm certain that this game didn't see a wide post-release support, or maybe people just don't know about it, so I'm pretty sure you probably can't find it officially, so Visual Boy Advance might be your only way to see Kirby bounce around on these classic boards. I mean, I had fun with it, so that's all I can really say about it in this video. I'll put up a scoreboard for you guys. And thank you for watching. See you next time.